welcome back. This is Power Breakfast on Citizen TV. Good morning. My next conversation happening here is about Too Early for Birds, an ongoing series of theatre productions, and I'm joined by some of the writers and performers in this production. So I'll have you guys introduce yourselves. We'll start here.
My name is Ngatia, a co-founder, writer and performer.
Okay, welcome.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here.
My name is Abu. I'm a writer, co-founder, and performer as well.
Okay.
We actually are the only two writers.
You're the only two writers. Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying that. Now, I called it a series of theatre productions.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about how people confuse what you do with plays.
Mm-hmm.
So explain the difference of what it is that you do.
Well, a play usually has a set format. You have the scene description, then characters come in, and they have their dialogue and action and all that. It's usually, unless it's a one-person play, it's usually two or more characters. Mm-hmm. In what we do, usually it's Abu walks on stage and starts narrating a story. And sometimes in the story, there are reenactments that look like pieces of a play. And we also include a lot of references, pop culture references and all that. So it's more of the old storytelling that we show, say, a fire, but now in our context, like how we would like stories to be told.
Right.
Yes.
So you're telling stories of Kenya's history. You're telling stories about crime, about independence, about politics, and so many other issues. Why the title Too Early for Birds?
Oh, he always leaves this question to me. Too Early for Birds is a moniker from the first ever title from Owa's blog. Owa is the inspiration behind Too Early for Birds. So he writes about history and everything. His first title was Too Late for Worms. And then later on, he came up with Too Early for Birds, and I have to explain it all the time.
Right.
Birds in this reference means all the oppressive powers, oppressive situations that dawn on people. Worms are the people who work the soil, who bring nitrogen to the soil and everything. We don't want to get scientific with it, but then again, the early bird catches the worm. So this is too early for these birds, these oppressors. Before their time, we had stories. So we are trying to tell those stories before any form of oppression came in into the scene.
So again, you said this all started from a blog, a series of blog posts, and you decided to turn them into performances. How long ago was that?
Owa has been blogging for a while. I think for like 8 years now. Owa is a researcher and a journalist. And basically, the blog started in around 2010, and it was chronicling interesting stuff from Kenya. See, the most absurd lies that Kenyans have been told, the most hilarious things that politicians have said, the most badass criminals that have existed in Kenya. So that has existed for a while. And during that period, at some point, I met Owa, and we were friends with Abu from the performance scene. And eventually, we all started hanging out together, and were discussing different projects that we were doing. And we all had an interest in storytelling and performance and history. But it took so long for all those interests to kind of merge. So that happened in, I think, 2016.
Yeah.
And we were working on a totally different project. We were working on more of a TV project. And I'm like, yo, how about we actually take this on stage? It became a very organic conversation. We can't pinpoint one moment when it happened. It's just that one conversation led to another, and before we knew it, we had committed.
Was there any hesitation of taking this to the stage, because it's sort of not the most conventional format that people are used to going into a theater watching a play? I mean, and you guys are doing something completely different. Was there any hesitation there?
I don't think we had an option. We booked the dates for the first show before we wrote the first draft of the script. And our thing is, we are from theater. We have a long theater background, and we thought, TV is so hard to get into. Why don't we try the spaces that are already available to us, which is theater? So you can, it's less of a process going into theater as opposed to TV. Hence, us taking Too Early for Birds on stage.
Right.
So I'll admit the moments we sat and we were like, okay, so will Kenyans actually pay to come and listen to history?
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
What was your first production like? What was the response? What was the experience on stage?
The process was nerve-wracking because we also didn't know exactly what we were doing. So we were trying to figure things out in the process. But the response was just overwhelming. We thought when we booked the space, we just performed, I think exactly a year ago actually. We just performed to an audience of 36 people at the Kenya National Theatre, which seats 345 people.
Right.
So when we booked the space, we were like, okay, so how is this going to? But then the show was just sold out. People, especially online, especially on Twitter, just took the concept and ran with it, and people showed up. We were seeing pictures afterwards. When we were on stage, there were people outside who were trying to get tickets, but it was ready. So,
I heard about it on social media as well, on Twitter. I think I heard about one of your first productions. So that definitely got the word out there for you. So then you had a volume 2?
Yes.
What types of things did you learn in your first production that you brought into the second edition of Too Early for Birds?
One, people will always stand behind you if you give them good stuff. And I think the most interesting thing was that a lot of people came for the first show because they loved, they were friends with us, or they wanted to support our art. But then after that, people are actually coming up to us and admitting that we are coming for the stories. Like the first time we came for you guys, but this time we are coming for the stories.
Yeah.
And I think also, especially people in the cast, because it's not just the two of us who perform. We have a whole array of actors and actresses. If people in the cast and the crew believe in what you're doing, then they'll push it to the limit. Because when we approached people we knew and we're like, okay, so here's a really weird concept. We really don't have money. We really don't know if people are going to come, but this is what we think. And people bought it and they got into it.
Right.
And I think we learned that the people who are loyal to you, especially artists, will always come through for you if you have good something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said people that the second time around, people came for the stories. Talk to us about some of those stories. Give us a snippet of what your first or second productions were about.
So the first production was about forgotten heroes, people who are not necessarily in the top-notch part of history, people who are only community-based heroes, and that's the main point. We wanted to extract these stories and bring it out to people and show them that each and every community has a hero, and to tell their stories is much important. Actually, after the first show, we used to get people submitting their stories online and giving a poll on which stories we as Too Early for Birds are meant to do next. So the story was about Otenyo Nyamaterere. In the first story, a Kisii warrior who kind of gave the Kisii people a window period of breathing when the colonialists came in. And again, we embarked on a Chitambe War in the western region of Kenya, where there were forts, like actual Game of Thrones like forts. Wow. 30 of them spread across western Kenya, and they stood, and the British, coupled with armies from all around the region, took about a year.
Yeah, like they got beat the first time. It was specifically the Bukusu, so they beat the British off, and they had to take a whole year to gather armies from Uganda and Sudan and come back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So such stories that are forgotten. You can't
Mudhoni Nyanjiru,
who led 8,000 people along Harithuku Road
in 1922.
1922 to free Harithuku from Central Police Station. And such stories are not readily available.
Yeah.
But then again, we try so hard to get the material from already established sources, the archives, Macmillan Library, newspapers, TV interviews. It's all about looking at those places and tapping into digital spaces as well, engaging people. Many of the productions fail because they do not engage other people. They don't ask questions. They want to do everything by themselves, and that is quite detrimental because it gives you a thin line of existence. But when you engage other sources, the media houses, the digital space, the people who are actually online, then you get more stories and it keeps you running for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who think that this the younger generation is particularly apathetic when it comes to our history, or caring about anything that isn't trending currently at the moment? What do you have to say to people who think that way? Because hearing what you guys are describing, I mean, you went through an entire research process to just find out more about these stories, and people might say, well, that's a little bit unusual.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
They should get out of their heads and actually meet young people, because I've stood in front of cumulatively about 2,000 young people, because that's basically the people who come to our shows.
You're playing it down.
Yes.
2,000.
No, just cumulatively, let's say 2,000 in the last 1 year, who've come to listen to history, and they come again and again, and these conversations continue online. And OWA as a blog has existed for about 10 years now, because mostly young people want to know about history and keep going back to that. And young people are asking us to give them more stories, even people who are not in Nairobi. So, for instance, like this weekend, we are taking the show to Nanyuki, because young people in Nanyuki said, we really don't have a theater, but we have the Nanyuki Sports Club, so you guys can come here anytime you want. And we don't want those stories to be in Nairobi.
Yeah.
And that applies to people in Mombasa. We're having conversations with young people in Mombasa who want to listen to these stories, having conversations with young people in Nakuru, in Kisumu, in Kampala.
Yeah. Kigali.
Wow.
Kigali.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Isn't that sort of like the best case scenario here for you guys, that people are asking for more and people are saying, take the show on the road?
It is.
So you're going to Nanyuki this weekend.
Yeah.
Tell us about where and the details on that, and which days you're going to be there.
So the Nanyuki story is called Tour Early for Birds. We're trying to take all these stories. That's the first town that we're stopping. The concept is to tell the stories on the road, as opposed to just sticking to Nairobi alone. Turn Up Travel, who have offered us a fantastic package for people in Nairobi to go and experience that Too Early for Birds experience in Nanyuki, have offered a package which you can find at our social media handles, which is Too Early for number 4 birds. It's 7,000 shillings, 7,500 for camping at All Pejeta, and then the ticket is included in that price. So it's a two-night show, and we're staying there for 3 days. That will be quite an amazing experience, because you're not only going there for the show, you're going there for extracurricular activities like hiking, swimming, and forest drive. And
so it's a whole experience.
It's an entire experience.
Yes, but even for just the Nanyuki people who are not coming with us, they can just buy a ticket for 1,000 bob.
Yeah.
There. And even for people who want to come with us to Nanyuki but don't want to camp, there's a hotel package for them as well. Yes.
Yeah. You guys have also performed at the Story Moja Festival. What was that experience like?
We've performed multiple times at Story Moja Festival, but as individuals, as individual poets.
Okay.
And the experience is quite the same. However, at a larger scale is what Too Early for Birds gave us. We didn't expect that people would take that interest as well, because we thought, KNT, Kenya National Theatre, gives you that opportunity to attract people to a national theatre. I mean, so many revolutionary plays happened there.
Yeah.
However, we were so skeptical about Story Moja, but then again, people still came for the stories. So it gave us an idea of, no matter where we take these stories, there will be an interest over there. And it's a historical place.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure.
It was at the National Museum.
Yeah.
Also, so there's the history side of the museum, but also the literary side of the Story Moja Festival. And when they meshed together, we were like, okay, this actually feels like a second home. Because,
Feels right.
Yeah, and that's where we met so many people. That's where we met the people from Uganda who want the play to go there. The reception was amazing. We were like, okay, maybe the next step should be books.
Yeah, maybe. You had a third volume of Too Early for Birds. Can you share the story of what that was about briefly?
That was about crime. Yeah, so growing up, there are all these stories we used to hear, mostly legends, about criminals and crime fighters, Wanogo, Washosho, and we're never really sure if they were true.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. I remember hearing those stories of being like, somebody made something.
Yeah, it's something doesn't add up. So, Owa is the one who initially went into looking into these stories to see if they were true. And there was a blog post with, I think, 7 worst criminals that Kenya has ever had. So we took that blog post and were like, okay, are these all the ones that have been around? What are the most outrageous things that have happened in the Kenyan underworld? And so we looked at that from the 70s. So there were 2 criminals from the 70s, a guy called Wakenyonga, a guy called Danson Gashui, who stole 2 machine guns from 2 cops.
Oh, wow.
At gunpoint. Right?
At gunpoint.
Like, I don't know how that happened.
That's interesting.
And then we moved to the 80s, and anyone who grew up in Nairobi has heard about Patrick Shaw, PD Shaw, who was moonlighting as a police reservist at night, and during the day he was an administrator at Starehe Boys Center. And he was the most feared person in the country, probably after the president.
Yeah.
And then in the 90s, now we actually now got to explore the story of Washosho, Wanogo, Rasta, their gang, and the police squad that took them down, which was led by a guy called Serone, and what eventually happened to that police squad. So we were looking at both sides of crime, the crime fighting and the actual crime in itself.
It must be interesting to tell stories of crime when, you know, we're living in a country that insecurity is still, you know, a major woe for many Kenyans. It hasn't seemed to ease up. So really interesting stuff there. Why do you think it's important for you to tell these stories? Why do you think you as young Kenyans, why do you think it's important for you to tell these Kenyan stories?
I think it came from curiosity. All through high school and primary school, we learned about history, but it was so jumbled up and it was so general. You learn more about world wars as opposed to your own history, which kind of, it left a gap. There was no information about history, about the people of Kenya, the people of a particular community, the people of Turkana, people of Mombasa. It was just a generalized history, which is sadly there up until now. So we wanted to tell these stories of before independence, because once you think about Kenyan history, every single person is going to tell you about 1963.
Right.
We raised the flag and everything was happy, and then down the line.
And then more happened.
And then more happened, and then down the line. It was what happened before that. What was Kenya in 1600s? What was Kenya like in BCs?
Right.
So the curiosity to find out how people came along and what their stories were is what drove Too Early for Birds.
Right. I think they are very important stories to tell. I think you piqued the curiosity of many people watching who would maybe want to come see a show in Nanyuki or just follow the work that you guys are doing. So maybe you can share your social media handles and all that where people can get more information if they're looking to contact you.
Right. It's Too Early, number 4, Birds, on Twitter and on Instagram.
And on Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
On Facebook is Too Early for the word FOR, Birds. And Ngatia, Ngartia, all across.
Abu Sense.
Okay.
ABU sense _
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have this morning, but thanks for stopping by. I wish you all the best in your upcoming performance, and keep telling those stories. I think you're doing important work. Gatia and Abu here on Power Breakfast talking about Too Early for Birds. Make sure that you check them out if you're in Nanyuki this weekend. So for now, we're going to cross over to Willis Raburu and Chef Ali standing by with some breakfast tips. Don't go far.